So we probably can get started. Are all the petitioners and opponents, everybody here at this point?
No, your attendees, well, give me a minute here. They're just popping in now.
Let me get all my material here.
Hey, Dan, could you understand the figures that he gave in terms of the, because that was like Greek to me.
The figures on that they gave, you know, he gave the chart on these figures. I couldn't understand that. Was anybody able to understand that?
No.
A chart with what figures?
Well,
you
he
got?
had a bunch of numbers.
I'm sure they're going to present
one-page
that.
chart.
Didn't mean anything to me either.
I was like, I don't know what this means, you know, in terms of what's there. So that was, yeah, I just couldn't understand that. The other stuff I understood. One of the things we did is get a meeting, so I'd like to at least get the letter we got from Attorney Stratton put into the record. I was a little bit disturbed to have them say they were not contacted in any way, shape, form, or manner to have a power put on their property. When Verizon sort of represented us that they had contacted people and they hadn't heard back from them. Now, I don't know, maybe they contacted them and Verizon didn't get back to them, but they claim they weren't contacted and they own parcels that are over 30 acres in that area that potentially could have been sites. So, but.
No, I just want to check. I was sent an email with all the updated stuff, and I don't remember seeing anything in there about any new evaluations of properties and kind of what you're alluding to there, Mark.
Yeah, it was in Attorney Stratton's letter. There's an allegation in his letter. Here, let me read it to you. He basically is my firm as I represent him. He lives at 96, which abuts the property. He owned, and Ms. Normandin as well owns property that's at 540 Summers Road, known as Apple Place, which also abuts the property. You know, Ms. Normandin lived, both of them lived there. She's run the Apple Place. Have raised so concerning. Fisher has failed to adequately demonstrate the request variant preserves the purpose and intent of the bylaws. You know, basically, let me get the page. Property value depreciation, which determine feasible alternative locations, and I think this is where he comes in here. It is plenty of 725 feet. Any property is not just consider existing homes and neighbors of potential resident on the property. Where hundreds of feet, the bird shouldn't be on the things. Should be located to reduce the need for telecommunication. They relocated it to a certain extent. The question is whether that's going to be sufficient. There was somewhere in here he talked about. I've got to find it here.
Yeah, I've gone through them all, but I see a cover letter, but I don't know if there was more to it than that. And then I see
hey, Mark, are you talking about this chart with all the frequency numbers on it?
Yeah, yeah.
I believe this relates.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's with the different numbers that they have based on the megahertz.
Well, but the purpose, I think, in them sending it to us was to deal with the concern or the contention that somebody raised that that their online mapping available to the consumers doesn't show any gap in coverage, and yet the basis for their petition is that there's a gap in coverage, which I agree with. Being, you know, in the telecommunications industry, you don't tell your customers what your weaknesses are.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I understand that. I think that's what that relates to.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think I just didn't understand the numbers.
Yeah, well, they're going to be transmitting in 3 or 4 different frequencies off that tower. You know, they have to deal with 4G and now 5G, and they still have to support
Yeah.
3G. So that's like 3 different bandwidths, 3 different pieces of transmission equipment that they use on that tower.
Yeah. And then it's his footnote number 2. In fact, Mr. Bernie is a record owner of 91-1 on Parker Street with very close proximity to the proposed wireless facility. Okay. The property is perhaps 33 acres of agriculture with wooded areas of wetlands of eastern border, which could help disguise any tower. And there are no residences, meaningful resident opportunities when setback. Petitioner has never contacted Mr. Bernie to inquire about or investigate this location. It's in the footnote on the bottom of page 2 of his letter. And that was just a concern that I had, because it represented that they had done, a pretty exhaustive search, and this was the location they came up with. So, but we can address that, and in terms of the allegation in the letter, but we got to get that into the record. So we might as well. Is everybody here now at this point?
Everybody's here, Mark, yes.
Okay, so we might as well open the continued. Do you want to read the notice of the continued hearing?
I can. For which one are we gonna do?
Well, I think it's a continuation of the hearing on the
For Verizon?
yeah.
Okay. So ZB 2021-4 request for use, variance under Federal Telecommunications Act 1996 from the Islamic zoning bylaw, section 5.53 for a 125-foot telecommunications monopole tower and related equipment at 16 Meadowbrook Road, assessor parcel ID 78-1-0 in the Residence A zoning district, and request for dimensional variance for plus or minus 150 feet relief, Islamic zoning bylaw, section 5.54 setback requirements. Petitioner Celco Partnership doing business as Verizon Wireless, Wallingford, Connecticut. Rescheduled from 10/18/2021, continued from 11/8/2021.
Is there someone here for the, what I would like to do is take the material that have brought in and label that new material, which would be the new site plan that they gave us with the new location of the facility on the site.
I'm bringing everybody in from Verizon now.
Okay. But I want to bring in those documents.
Well, they'll have that presentation.
Huh?
They will have that
Yeah,
presentation.
that's what I do, but I want to bring those in as exhibits now. And what's the next number on our exhibits? That plan, because this is a new plan number, which is going to change the size of the variance. It'll be less of a variance at this point.
Stephen Sobey.
This is in terms of the side yard, the setback requirements. But I mean, I assume we can do it as they want with the application, if you want to do it that way, as they bring it in. And then we'll introduce as a new exhibit, and then their letter of, but do you want to do the minutes first and approve the minutes from our last meetings? At least get those out of the way.
So that would be,
There was, I wasn't at the 12/6 meeting, but I was okay with the,
I think there's one
there was
typo
one
in
thing
there.
that it was one change I wanted to see in the minutes. But I wasn't at the 12/6, so I can't really comment at that one.
neither was I.
So the couple changes I wanted, the first 2 minutes were fine with, we did the extension, because we didn't have 5 members. And then the second one, I was okay with the continuation till there, but in the meeting, minutes of the November 8th meeting, I think it would have been posted in paragraph number, it's first page, the last full paragraph on page 1, which says there was no new legal notice posted. Well, I don't think that's accurate. I think it was published because they did it. We always post because it's an open meeting. To comply with the open meeting law, we need to post. So I'd like to change that from posted to published. Do you see that? On the minutes?
From December 6th?
No, for November 8th.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, I can change that.
Excuse me?
I can change that.
Yeah, it should be published, not posted, because we always post, we always have to post for the open meeting law. So that should get changed there. And then I think in page 2, there were a couple things. I'm not sure Stephen Sobey is an attorney at Schatz, Schwartz and Fenton. And also, and that's in the second paragraph of the letter. And then there is for the edge of a 55. It's from the edge of the 55, not for the edge. And I think we're missing some language. And for David Vivian on the 3rd page, in the first full, it says David Vivian site acquisition. I think he's their specialist. I think that's what his title was, but he's not a site acquisition. He's a specialist, I believe. Otherwise, the minutes were okay. Did anybody else have any changes on the minutes? So let's go through each of the minutes first, and then we'll approve those. So we had the first minutes we had were from the
Art, hang
October.
on 1 second. Did you
Okay.
see the chat? Did you see the pop-up in the chat? It says Stephen Sobey is an attorney.
Is he attorney at Schatz Schwartz?
Give me 1 second. Let me go back.
I think
to it.
he's an attorney, but I don't think he's at, I think he
It's-
worked
no,
for
it's
Verizon.
SSF. That's how they wrote.
Chairman, I'm an
Okay,
attorney at Schatz
so he is there. Okay, you're with them, Steve? I wasn't sure whether you were with Schatz Schwartz. Okay, I wasn't sure what your position was, whether you worked directly for them or with Schatz, so that's fine.
Oh, yeah, SSF. Okay, I see it now.
So, so the first meetings that we had were the October 18th meeting. Minutes, I was okay with those. Do we have a motion? Does anybody have any changes on that one?
No.
I'd move we approve those minutes.
So move.
All those in
Second.
favor, say, indicate by
Aye.
saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
So that's been approved. The second.
Hey,
minutes-
Mark, for the record, I abstained because I was not at that.
You weren't there, okay.
I
We
abstained
didn't
as
do
well. I was
anything,
not
yeah,
there.
and that's all we do is basically continue because we didn't have 5 members. Then the November 8th meeting with the changes, accepting the Stephen Sobey, which was accurate. Make the changes we talked about with those amended meetings, and then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as,
So
Those
moved.
minutes adjusted. I make a motion to approve.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I don't know about the December 6th. I wasn't there, so I really.
Well, I do have one on December 6th.
Okay.
I think it's paragraph 6 regarding the first item citing the HOA minimum square footage requirement. Board member Daniel Plotkin stated HOA reliefs are necessarily up, are not. And I don't think I said necessarily, I said not up for consideration under the jurisdiction of this board. In other words, the board doesn't have jurisdiction over HOA regs. Unless you disagree with me, Mark, which you might.
I don't disagree, or not. I wasn't there, so I can't, I can't agree or disagree. I don't know.
Okay, well, that's what I said, and since the
Okay.
minutes should reflect what I said, that's the correction I request we make.
Okay,
No further changes.
okay. Would you entertain a motion for those who were present at the December 6th meeting?
Make such a motion.
Okay, second,
Second,
second.
second.
All those in favor, indicate by
Aye.
saying aye.
Aye.
Brian Hill abstains, was not at that meeting.
Okay, so I also abstain. So now we get to our continuation. Is someone here to speak on behalf of Verizon?
Yes, I am.
Okay, hi, Ellen. So we received, I think we want to put into evidence the receipts we received from you.
Yes.
Buying the new location plan
Correct.
that we have. Let me get that together here. So in the data was a letter with regard to an opposition letter or a explanation in terms of this is a letter from Verizon called Sales Map Response.
Right.
I want to have that'll be the next exhibit entered in. I don't know what our last number was. I don't have a list of the exhibits from the last time. Do you have that, Bethany or Nina? But I want to introduce that as the next exhibit, the sales map response signed by Kip DeVito, RF engineer for wireless.
Yep, we have that.
Okay, and then we have an appraisal that was done by Bennett Franklin Realty Services.
Yep.
Effective date evaluation November 1st. That also includes the analysis from the balloon test as part of that. That was in there. And then there are new plans that are submitted showing a new location on the site. Let me get those plans. This is the new one title sheet. It's drawing T01 from Verizon by Chapel Engineering Associates.
Yes, we have that.
Revisions, the last revision was 12/1/21. And it consists of TO1, CO1, CO2, ECO2, AO1, AO2, AO3, RF101, RFO2, and then the next would be the cumulative power density calculations that were submitted would be the next exhibit. And then the last exhibit that I would ask to be introduced would be the letter from Attorney Stratton. So that we can make reference to those. Okay, Ellen, I'm sorry. I just wanted to get that out of the way.
That's okay. So I'll just briefly touch on these new exhibits and these new submissions that we added to our application. First, the plan, we did shift the tower as was requested. We moved it 115 feet further to the south. Now, if you measure the distance from the tower to the property line, we meet the requirements and we would need a variance. However, we read the zoning bylaw as requiring the setback from the outer edge of the compound. So
I think that's how it reads. One of the
Right.
concerns I had was when you did your calculations, Ellen, it looks like under the new plans that the monopole isn't centered like it was on the last plans.
well, it
It's
should be
more
a
to the southwest section of the site.
right. So again, but our measurement is still from the outside of the compound. So
Yeah.
we would still need the variance for being 30 feet short. but that's
It's a significant change, yeah.
from
What
what
I was
we
trying to make it
originally showed.
less impactful on the northerly abutters. And
Right.
it looks like, I'm not sure how much you may have relocated a little bit. I'm not 100% sure. Did you relocate?
We
a
did not
little
move
bit?
it. The distance to the eastern property boundary is the same as is the
Okay,
western
okay,
boundary. So
okay.
it's
That's,
just
I
a
wasn't
shift to the
100%
south.
sure on that. Okay. But the tower isn't as centrally located now
So,
on the new
and,
plan.
yeah. So again, I mean, it's well
Within
within
the compound, but yeah.
it's
I
well,
understand.
it's well within twice the height of the tower within the property
Yeah,
boundary.
because the plans like you have on one plan, it shows the tower sort of being in the center of your plan on
Oh,
01
no,
and
maybe,
301. And then,
Greg, if Greg can touch on that.
Do we-
Hi,
we
yeah,
have
this
a
is-
map Available? We have a new map with a new.
yeah, so I just had some questions. It looks like when you relocated, you put the tower isn't as centrally located as the first proposal. It's more toward the south and west side of the lease parcel.
So the tower relative to the compound has always been on the southwest corner of the compound. If you look in
Okay.
previous submittals, you would see that as well.
Okay,
So the exact same compound was,
okay, used, okay. That's, I
Yes.
wasn't sure, because this appeared to be a little bit more to the south
Yeah.
and west of the
I mean,
parcel.
it's, you can see, if you look at the sheet EC01 where you can
Yeah.
see a light dotted line outline and then the tower to the southwest corner of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
of the compound. Okay. So I don't know if anyone needs, if you want to show the plans to the public, we can put them
We
up.
could probably put them up so that people can understand where you relocated.
Right.
You can show them where you relocated the site.
Right.
Maybe if you could put side by side the original plan so they could see where the original was proposed, and where the new location is proposed.
All right. We'll try to.
See if that could be done. I don't.
Yeah,
know.
or yeah, we can do, yeah, our, yeah, techie person can do that. Okay, so then the other submission that we made, as you mentioned, was the power density calculation, which shows that if all of the antennas were a full blast, which is not the case, this is a worst case scenario, even at the full maximum exposure, we would still only be 17.29% of what would be permitted. So it's, we're well within the limits and well within, what we're allowed to do, but that's the max that it won't even reach that. That's again, a worst case scenario. Just,
Okay.
so, and then the other item we had was the sales map response. Okay, here's the side by side.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a 115-foot shift.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So going back to what we submitted, the sales map response, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and it shows, explains how the information is, how they gathered the information that they put on this map for the public, and it's, more like a 30,000 foot look at coverage as compared to the very detailed, intricate, analysis that's done to determine that a new tower is needed, new antennas needed, new coverage is needed, looking at many, many more requirements than just the capacity or just the coverage that they look at on these maps. And they do have, they explain all of the, the basic.
Yeah, I mean,
that you
frankly,
cannot-
I'm a little bit baffled in terms of, the various towers that, you had the operator of the tower, what their frequencies were, I assume those are the number of carriers on the tower, 4.
Yeah, okay, you're still talking, I'm sorry, you're on the power.
Yeah, I'm on your
density
cumulative power density regulator. I
Yeah.
frankly didn't quite understand them. I'm not an engineer, so like if someone could walk me through those at some point, but if you want to continue with your,
So if you want, we can just do that and then go one by one. So
Yeah.
Kip, if you want to talk about the power density.
Sure. Hi, good evening. I'm Kip DeVito. I'm an RF engineer at Verizon Wireless. It pretty much just breaks it down by the frequencies that we'll be using on our site. Verizon deploys multiple carriers or bands. And you'll see there in the second column, operating frequency. You have the 751. I talked about that earlier about our coverage layer.
Yep.
We utilize multiple other frequencies with different, we prefer different bands or carriers. And it just breaks down the important parts of how we come up with if or if not we are in compliant or being compliant with the FCC regulations. So you see on the far right, you see the fraction of each carrier, and then it sums them up to give you the 17.29%.
okay.
Any other questions on that report?
No, I didn't,
Okay.
I understood the final thing. I just, the numbers were, how you came up with that is,
Mhm.
it is what it is. I understand. I just didn't understand it.
Well, frankly, it's not really a zoning board issue to be concerned
Well,
with.
one of the issues was, I think, the safety, because some people were concerned about that, the frequencies. I think that's what you're trying to address here.
Yeah, I mean, just to show that we're given the Verizon has a license and they have to maintain certain
Right.
levels of emissions or they risk losing their license. And not only do they meet it, they are well below the
Below it,
level that would ultimately be, that would be permitted, but they never reach anything near what the FCC would allow.
Because I think there was some people who had some concerns about the fact that you were
Mhm.
potentially going to affect people's health by the emissions coming off of the tower.
Right, and so to keep the license, they have to, maintain these levels, and they do.
Okay.
Um,
That's, yeah, I mean, I understood that part. I just didn't know how you got to the 17.9 using all those numbers. I'm not.
So we want that to be part of the record. And then we submitted, as I said, the sales map response, which explains how they create the map that's on the internet for people to look at, which is a very general coverage picture of what of the coverage map of the coverage of the towers that currently exist, with a caveat of all the things that it doesn't include, and the fact that it's just for outside use, not inside, and again, and it doesn't consider a lot of other criteria that are needed when we look at where we need service.
I think I understood that letter. The only question I had was whether the board felt comfortable enough with that letter, obviously, from the engineer for the petitioner, without having that same, information reviewed by an independent engineer. That was my only question for the board members.
I can't imagine why this company would want to spend this money deploying a cell tower somewhere where it wasn't needed.
Yeah.
It doesn't, to me, I used to work for the phone company, so I'm somewhat jaded in that regard, but believe me, it was hard when I was in the phone company business to ever get them to spend money, period. So when they're making capital investments like this, it's because they find they got a gap in service.
Yeah. And I understand, but I didn't know whether the board would want to just accept this engineer's report without a third party. I'm okay with it, but
I would recommend they do. I don't see any reason for a third party for this.
unless somebody, if the petition, anybody in opposition has an engineer that wants to submit something that contradicts this, then we could to take that into consideration.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
right now, we don't have anything.
Several years of effort goes into finding a site and all the background investigations, due diligence before we get to this point. So this isn't done just on a whim. It's quite intricate and expensive, the whole process, and lengthy. So I was looking to see when we opened this file, it was many years ago that we've been at this. And then we submitted an appraisal. Bennett Franklin is located in East Long Meadow. They're very familiar with properties in East Long Meadow, very familiar with this site. And, their conclusion was that it would have no adverse, no diminution of value, property value, and that's been our experience and everywhere.
Yeah, no, I mean, there were some allegations and, yeah.
Right,
and
right.
I think this is.
I mean, it's more
a ton of those
an issue
allegations.
where if you don't have good service where you are, so.
Yeah.
Which is, a problem in a lot of places still when you're driving or talking and you get drop calls or you can't understand what someone's saying, more of a problem. So just to conclude, we did do an analysis. We looked at more than a dozen properties, and we appreciate those people who contacted me or contacted someone else at Verizon to offer their sites or suggest sites. And we've spent, since the last time we were together, a lot of time looking at sites. There were a number of them that were just too far away and just weren't considered, but there were 7 sites that were within the vicinity and worth taking a closer look at. And so we have spent time on that. And basically for, I think all of them, if not all, almost all of them also needed variances, but also were more problematic with regard to radio frequency with coverage, with providing meeting the needs of Verizon for the coverage and capacity. And, the site that we have is just better than any of these sites. I do want to also add that I heard your conversation about Mr. Burney, and we have some emails going back a few, like, I don't even know the dates, when we first started to look at these properties in this area. They go back to 2018, where efforts were made to reach Mr. Burney. And there's just several it's all internal emails saying that calls were made, emails were sent, and with an effort to call and to reach him and never connected. So the person who
We have
composed
any of
those-
that? Yeah, I'd like to at least have that in the record, because Mr. Burney is alleging that he's never even attempted to contact him.
Yeah, and
one of the
I'll leave that on to Verizon to, some of it has some proprietary information, but to the extent that we can
So they can
submit
redact it
evidence
prior
of that,
to-
right.
I just wanted to show that they did their search back then. Whether Mr.
Yeah.
Burney didn't return phone calls, I guess that becomes an issue or if you sent them an email or a regular mail and did receive a response, that would
Yeah,
be.
and that happens regularly when we're looking at sites. Some people respond, some don't understand what what we're looking for. So, so we can submit that. We'll redact what we need to and can submit evidence of the efforts that were made. So we do have a few slides that we can just go over the sites that we looked at and have our radio frequency engineers just go over briefly why these sites were.
Well, if you would, that would be helpful.
Yep. Jay, are you going over these slides? You're on mute.
I apologize. I was double muted. Good evening, members of the board and members of the public. This is Jay Latore. I'm a radio frequency engineer with Verizon. Home address 122 Forest Hills Road in Springfield. Maybe before I go further, could just someone confirm that you can hear me okay?
I can hear you.
You can be a little louder.
Sure, I can do that, and I'm going to hold my mic up really close to my mouth so that it's as clear as possible. Great. Thank you, Attorney Sobey, for stepping through these. If you could please advance to the next slide. Okay, and just bear with me. I'm just going to hide something on my screen so I can see the slides. There we go. Okay, we put together a series of slides that I believe will help in a simple way to explain to both the public and the board what we are trying to do here. Verizon certainly understands that many members of the public as well as members of the boards are not expected to be efforts in radio frequency design. It's our responsibility at Verizon to give you as much education as possible so that everyone can make an informed decision. So what you're looking at here, just to make sure everyone is oriented properly, we're looking at the southeast portion of East Long Meadow. Steve, if you see some of the black lines there, so the ones that run north-south, that's the border between East Long Meadow and Hamden, and the one that runs east-west, that's the border between Massachusetts and Connecticut. And then I think it's pretty easy to see. You can see Parker Street, Hamden Road, and Summers Road / Route 83. You can see here the existing facilities in the area. We're just focused on the existing, what we call macro or larger cell site facilities, towers and water tanks to simplify this. And there's 3 that we're looking at. The site in the, I guess I'll call it northeast corner, that is colored in red, is a site that Verizon has called Hamden West 2 in the town of Hamden. There's another site in the southeast corner that is in blue. That's called our Hamden South site. There's another site in the far western corner. That's it's called East Long Meadow Relo. We just call it our East Long Meadow water tank site. I think it's called Relo because many years ago we were on the other water tank at that property and then moved over to the second one. So that's just an internal thing. And then you see the site in green with those green shapes. That is our proposal at 16 Meadowbrook Road. And so, you know, a couple of things I'll call out to you. This map is showing our 700 megahertz coverage, and its signal level is set to our outdoor signal strength. We are showing what we call a, how should I call it? Just basically a dominance map. It's meant to show at a single threshold, if you were standing in a single location, which site would you be most likely to be connected to? All things considered, assuming all the sites are on, et cetera. And so that's what we're trying to show. And so what you can see here is that much of the coverage in this part of town comes from the water tank site. And then we do have our 2 sites in Hamden that are pushing coverage back into East Long Meadow. And we've previously provided testimony that shows that all of these sites are under some type of capacity strain. And we've previously cited information that shows that in this area, while we do have reliable outdoor service, there's a need for improvements in both on-road and indoor service. We were actually talking this week about the fact that if we were sitting here maybe 2 years ago, we'd all be in the same room right now discussing, you know, this proposal together. And instead, most of us, or at least some of us, are from our homes. And that's really shown you a concrete example of how the needs of the wireless networks have changed in the last couple of years as more people are working from home, learning from home, conducting civic government from home. And some of us may be even using an outdoor network to connect to the internet today. So there's a need here. And the one thing I'd like to say, and then I'll start to move through these slides a little more quickly, is that what we're trying to do here is to build a facility that is relatively equidistant between the other 3 facilities. That allows us to do a couple of things. Number one, it gives us an opportunity to have a chance to properly offload each of the 3 facilities to the point where service is going to be improved in this general area, whether you're connected to the new site or you're close enough to one of the existing sites that you're going to continue to connect to that. So building too close to one particular site and further away from, you know, the other 2 sites is not advantageous to Verizon's network plan because we may lose our ability to properly offload a facility and we may create additional interference in the areas in between those 2 sites that are too close to one another. So this site does a really good job of that. Stephen, can you advance to the next slide here and we'll start to go through this a little faster. So this is the same slide, but what I'm trying to show is now, if we were permitted to build the proposed facility, how the dominance would change. Where would this site become the more dominant site in town, or where would it become, taking traffic? And that's what this site does. And it does a pretty good job of this. And I want to explain to the board, RF design is complex. It's not just done by using, radio frequency maps. If you all remember the old days where you had that Verizon, can you hear me now guy that would go out into the field and drive the sites and see, that the service was improved. We still do that. So, we use advanced design tools to identify the best location for facilities. We model them using advanced, GIS information. But at the end of the day, we still go out into the field after we build facilities and while we're optimizing areas to tweak and adjust sites, whether it's changing an azimuth of an antenna or shrinking the footprint with some tilt, all sorts of different things. So this view is really just to show if we turned on the site and didn't do a thing to the other facilities, where would it become dominant? But the reality is in the real world, should we be able to proceed with the site, we'll be taking additional steps to then optimize all the other sites around this to shrink their footprints a little bit more and to grow this footprint a little bit more. But we can't do that today without the new facility proposed. And because of that, our existing facilities have become strained. Okay, let's go into some of the details here and we'll start to move a little quicker here. So as Attorney Fryman mentioned, there were a lot of different sites that we've looked at, but we looked at about 6 or 7 that were roughly within a mile of our proposal. And, we felt that they were worth a little more consideration. So I'll go through these. I'm going to speak strictly from a radio frequency perspective, and then I'll allow Attorney Fryman, if there are more questions about any of these subject parcels and our other experts, to talk about other challenges that other facilities might have. So we looked at Squire Farm, 583 Summers Road. This site is just due south of our proposed site. And what this site does is we lose the ability to establish dominance north of Hamden Road. That signal strength and ability to be dominant diminishes. We do increase some of our coverage towards the south and the southeast as the site moves further that way. And I'm sorry, I meant to say the southwest, excuse me. But the reason this site is not viable for us is that we're expanding our coverage into areas that are a little more rural in nature and can rely on just outdoor coverage. And we're really losing the opportunity to provide more indoor service to those homes along Parker Street north of Hamden Road. Next slide, please, Stephen. This is another property, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing this wrong. The Summers Road Haberun property, same general problem. We're moving even a little further south and a little further east. We're getting even closer towards that lower south eastern facility in Hamden, getting further away from the center. And at this point, our ability to establish some dominance north of Hamden Road is significantly diminished. We are pushing some more service out towards the west and the southern portion of town, but really not the areas where we're most in need of offloading and enhancing, service. Next slide. Again, here is a parcel on Pease Road owned by Mrs. Goldstein, and there are a couple of different parcels that we looked at owned by Mrs. Goldstein. This is just one of them. Kind of the same story, even further away, pushed towards the southwest. Maybe equidistant between 2 of our sites, the water tanks and the Hamden site in the southeastern corner, but really getting further away from our other Hamden site, the one with the red color, and really limiting our ability to provide any sort of meaningful offload to that facility that's going to allow us to continue to make the type of investment needed to keep up with the growth in demand for service. Next slide, please. Okay. Here's another facility, 185 Meadowbrook Road. Just wanted to say a couple things about this one. I did think it was appropriate that we talked about this because on this property, which is an open farm area, there is an Eversource transmission tower that exists on the property, and sometimes there's questions about, well, could you co-locate on the tower as opposed to building something new? And we want to be honest that yes, Eversource and does allow for co-location on these facilities, but they're very challenging to co-locate on. And there's two key points that I want to stress to the board here. One is when you're dealing with high power transmission lines, you've got one of two options. The first is that, and that's what I'm showing here, is that you can co-locate below the high power lines. And what that allows you to do is to, get a center line of antennas of roughly 60 feet. And what it allows you to do is to generally work on that site safely. Anytime you need to make an upgrade, or maybe that there's an outage and you've got to fix an antenna or a radio, without the need to coordinate a shutdown with Eversource, where they would basically redirect power to some other transmission lines so that someone could safely work on those antennas. The other option is to install the antennas on top of the power lines, or on the top of the tower is what I mean to say. And then you can get the height, but then there is no safe way to work on that equipment without coordinating a shutdown. And, at the end of the day, companies like Eversource, they do make their, equipment available to companies like Verizon, but their main, responsibility is not to be a co-location opportunity for wireless carriers. Their main responsibility is to safely transmit electricity from A to B. And so if we've got an outage, if we've got a radio out of service or something going on, we can't rely that Eversource is just going to stop doing what they're doing and work with us, to get us up there. It could be months or even a year before we get up there to fix something. So they really are problematic in the industry. And in particular, because this one is pretty significantly further southeast away from kind of that center point, that sweet spot, we don't see it as a viable alternative to us. Next slide, please. Yeah, here's another one. This is 43 South Bend Lane. This is the Goldstein property. This property, as you can see here, is much further west than our proposal. And so again, the big issue here is that we're now, I think, just barely, or maybe even less than a mile from the water tanks. In fact, there's an interesting phenomenon you see here where if you're moving from west to east, you go from being dominant on the water tank to our proposed site, and then you go back to the yellow if you were driving from, say, northwest to southeast on Summers Road, because eventually the water tanks that are on a much higher elevation of ground overshoot our site. And so not only would this site create some interference with the water tanks, it's really going to be incapable of providing any sort of relief to the Hamden facilities. And so we're going to be in very much so the same issue that we're at today, even after the investment in a lot of areas. Next slide, please, Stephen. Okay, this is another facility. This is Meadowbrook Farm, just off of Parker Street. I believe this is another property that's owned by Mr. Burney. And so we looked at this one as well. And I think the visual is very helpful here. We've, in our testimony, we've communicated that one of the problems we're trying to solve here is to provide a more dedicated Verizon solution to the residents of southeastern East Longmeadow, as opposed to what we have today, which is a lot of dominance on our water tank site, and then sites in Hamden where we're pushing coverage back in as far as we can. you look at this facility, you know, we're very close to the Hamden line. We're just barely over the line in East Long Meadow. And, you know, it becomes very challenging to then design the type of facility that's going to have a meaningful impact to as many residents in East Long Meadow as possible. I mean, some of this service, you know, really pushes back, you know, into Hamden. And, you know, that's okay in that, you know, we've tried to explain that, you know, the RF energy doesn't know, you know, town lines, right? We push sites from, you know, one town into the other all the time, but this really, you know, isn't a viable site for us because we're meeting such a small amount of the need that we have to have here to provide service to customers in East Long Meadow. And we're really not going to offload in any meaningful way our water tank site, which, as you can see from these maps, is already, you know, taking a lot of traffic because it's covering such a large area. Stephen, you can go to the next slide, please, 10. This is another site that came in a little bit later. I'm gonna, again, I'd ask Attorney Fryman at some point to discuss this site. This is the Apple Place, 540 Summers Road. And this site is actually a good example of a site, you know, that is relatively equidistant to the three sites and does, you know, a roughly similar job to what our proposal does. And, you know, what I would comment here is in my notes, you know, we've looked at this site and due to the, you know, particulars of the size of the parcel, it's really in the same situation as our proposal, which is that there isn't a location on the site, on the parcel, excuse me, that can meet a dimensional, you know, there's no place to site a tower that doesn't require a dimensional variance, is what I'm trying to say. In addition to the fact that, like all of these parcels we've been looking at tonight, you know, require use variances. Okay, Stephen, we've got two more slides I want to show, and then I'll be complete. So if you look at slide 11, Steve, this is a slide I tried to put together to just summarize all the different parcels we looked at here, just trying to explain to the board and the public some of the things that we look at. And what they show is the first 7 rows show the 7 sites that I went over. And then the last row, number 8, shows our subject parcel, 16 Meadowbrook Road. And, you know, looking at this, you know, we're working very hard to provide a solution to the town that's going to allow Verizon the greatest amount of flexibility needed to provide meaningful offload to the adjacent 3 facilities. And to do that, we've got to try and be as equidistant from the 3 facilities as possible. And our site does a pretty good job of doing that. That's row 8, the one that's in bold. If you look at a lot of these other sites, you know, I was looking at this, you'll see that quite a few of them are, you know, less than 1.5 miles from an adjacent site. The issue being there in this particular instance that we're now trying to push 2 sites relatively close to one another, which is going to create some additional interference that could negatively impact our customers' experience. Or we've got quite a few sites because of how they are, you know, set up, are greater than 2 miles away from the existing, from one of the 3 facilities. And that creates a different challenge, which is that your ability to push enough RF energy towards an area so that you can offload an existing facility and move customers onto this facility is greatly diminished. And every area has to be looked at differently, but we always are looking at what our existing facilities are doing and the distance between them. And we work very hard to find a location that is going to provide the maximum level of benefit to our customers. And that's why we're in the area that we are in. And the last thing that I'll mention, Stephen, just one last slide, please, slide 12. I just wanted to include these as well. They're more brief notes, but because, you know, a lot of residents as well as members of the board and public, participants in the last meeting brought these up. We did just want to, highlight generally that we did look at all these additional locations. But what we would stress to the board here is that some of these locations I would think would represent, folks maybe just trying to find a parcel that they thought in general would make sense for a tower. And that's reasonable, but we've got to think about, what is Verizon's need and what are Verizon's customers' need. And so the purpose of this facility is to provide service in southeastern East Longmeadow and to offload the three main facilities that we're talking about. So looking at sites like the Enfield State Prison or the Big Y Plaza or the Graziano land in the northeastern portion of town, they really don't meet Verizon's coverage objective. In fact, none of these do, because they're just simply too far away to be considered. But we did want to let the board know that, we had a lot of different sites, looked at them, and we gave them all at least some level of review at your request to let the residents know that, we have looked at them. And we do this. We're always looking at a lot of different parcels. And as Attorney Fryman has mentioned, there's a lot that we look at, and Attorney Fryman mentioned it. We first started looking in this area in 2014. We've been working on this, for 7 years. And we've known for a long time that there's going to be a need out here. So I know, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I've given you a lot of information here. That was my last slide. And I'm happy to, answer questions that you may have about this or anything else. And I thank you.
Well, I'd just like to say that that was an exhaustive analysis of how you pick a site that, in my view, obviates any further questions that I would have or that I would think anybody else should have regarding whether or not this is the best possible location for what it is you want to do. And it would seem to me that the board's purpose now should be less on the engineering aspects of this petition and then less on land values and less on who else did they call or who didn't they call or who should they have called, and more on what is the statutory requirements that this petitioner needs to meet and what finding can this board arrive at to grant them what they've come here for.
Yeah, the only thing I would ask is that stuff be just introduced as an exhibit so that we have it on the record.
The reason I'm saying that is I just don't know that we need to spend another 45 minutes.
No, I'm not looking at it, but I do think it
out.
should be in our record as an exhibit.
I'm gonna send you an email, and if you need hard copies too,
Yeah,
of that
just
slide.
Or
deck,
the thing,
plus
so we can
the,
have that be the next exhibit number.
and the emails regarding Mr. Bernie's attempt to reach Mr. Bernie.
Correct. Those would be the next two exhibits.
Right.
When we receive those.
So what's
My
next?
only question is, two sites on there were noted to be fairly equitable, that being the Apple Place and that being Parker Street. Are those still viable questions or no?
Well, again, we would still need variances, and they're no better than what we're proposing. And they have the same challenges. And again, relocating on the site that we feel is the ideal location, I think meets some of the requests of the abutters that we've heard from.
That's fine. Are there any other questions with regard to the citing, how they chose this site and what Verizon went through? I just want to make sure everybody's on the board is satisfied.
Yes, very satisfied. That was a great explanation.
Nice presentation.
So the next, I think, concern is I'd like to just get the details so that if we're going to grant any type of variance, that we actually have the actual dimensions from the exterior of the compound in all directions.
Mark, is the public, did we close the public portion on this?
No, this is the petitioner going, giving us some additional information. We're still in the public session of this.
Oh, I would think now would have been a pretty good time to let the public.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
sure-
I
I'm
didn't know if
sure-
we wanted to present and then let
Okay,
them finish
okay.
up their presentation and then let the public address each one, and then we'll give them an opportunity to, rebut whatever is given up by the public. So I wanted to get into the site itself, just to make sure we had all of the proper dimensions from each of the property lines. Ellen? So I just want to make sure that we're accurate here. I think
Well,
it's,
isn't there a site plan that's been submitted?
yeah, there
with
is,
all
but I
of the
want to make sure
dimensions on
that
it?
we're accurate, and I just want to make sure that I understand. From the northerly line, it appears we're 200 feet. Is that accurate, Ellen?
Let me just get my copy of the plan. Two, 220 feet,
We're 220 feet? Okay,
right? And the requirement is 250, so we're short
30
30
feet.
feet.
Right, no, I understand, but that's significantly better than what was originally
Right.
proposed. And on the easterly side, is it 100 feet?
It's 100 feet.
Okay. And on the westerly side? is that
We're
300?
good there.
Yeah,
we're
but
good
it's
there.
300. That 300 is accurate there. And then
Yeah,
I think
whatever.
the southerly side is irrelevant because it's well over
Right.
the distance. Okay.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure we had the accurate
Yeah.
number,
Correct.
because the number I had was so small, my eyes aren't that great.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was 200 feet, but it's 220. Okay.
Yeah, it's 220.
Okay.
It was 105 and now it's 220.
220, okay. I don't know if any other questions, and I just note that's 220 from the exterior of the northern exterior of the site. And within the site, what's the distance of the pole from the northerly? Do we have some? I didn't see that anywhere, but where the actual pole is to the northerly line on the site, do we know what that distance is?
Greg, can you tell me what that distance is from the pole to the northern boundary line?
The northerly section of the pole to the northerly property line.
I was looking at the drawings on my phone, and unfortunately my phone just died on me. If someone could call up the site plan again, I'll take a look and see if that's on there. If it isn't on there, we can obviously put it on there. You're looking for the distance from the monopole, the proposed monopole, to the northerly property line.
I just say both the northerly and the easterly. Those are the two that I would be
Well, if
interested
you
in.
know where it is to the edge of the compound, then we already know it's 200.
Right, we know it to the edge. It's just from
30.
the edge of the compound to the actual monopole.
Right.
Attorney Sobey, this is Jay Latore. Could you go to C01, please? It would be one page. That's the page.
Yeah, that's what I was
Could you
looking
please
at.
zoom in on that so Mr. Sakir could confirm? Thank you.
Yeah, it would actually be CO2 that would show it the best. On CO2 is where we show the setbacks to the actual compound. And then when you get into sheet A01 is when the dimensions within the compound are defined. So it would be a matter of arithmetic, or we could show it on CO2 as well.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find out where the monopole is within the site from the easterly and northerly lines, because that's what you're looking in terms of the variance.
Yeah, so the
This
compound is 49.5 feet by 49.5 feet. And you take away 14.5 feet in either direction, which leaves you with 35 feet. So you'd want to take the 35 feet and add it to the northerly setback and the easterly setback.
So
Okay,
it would be 255
right.
To the north.
It'd be
from the tower
135,
to the northerly boundary line.
and it would be 135 from the tower to the easterly property line.
Right.
Okay, I'm satisfied. I don't know if there's any other questions in terms of that.
I don't think so, Mark. I think we're good.
Okay, now, I just want to understand, is this tower being designed with a break point that it doesn't, if it does fall, that it won't fall the whole 125 feet?
Yeah, I believe we represented that we would have it designed that way.
Okay, so that, you know, if we
Well,
did, I probably
I
want that.
believe
as
that
a
was
requirement.
discussed at the last meeting.
Right, I
Right.
just want to
Talked
make
about
sure
that.
that that's going to be
It is.
required, you know, that
We
will
can
be,
have that as a condition.
would be a condition. Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
this is David Vivian. I think we discussed at the last meeting. You don't actually design a tower for a fail point. Instead, what you do is you over-design with extra plating so that if it's going to fail, it will fail in a particular direction.
well, that's
It's
the
not-
issue. So if it's going to fail, I prefer that if it did fail, that it would fall toward the
South.
south and west.
Correct. And that can easily be done.
Okay, and that's, I just want to make sure that it's going to be designed to design.
Don't you think we want to be, you know, Mark, I understand where you're going with this, but don't you think we want to be careful about this? I mean, these are engineering considerations. You know, do we want to be stipulating which way a pole should fall?
Well, the
Shouldn't we
issue
leave that to
is,
people that know about this stuff?
well, my concern is they're looking for variance. One of the the reason for the variance is you want the pole so many feet from the sideline is because if it somehow gets wind blown or whatever,
No, I understand all
that
that.
it doesn't fall on somebody else's property. That's one of the concerns for the setback in our bylaws. So what I'm trying to do is to lessen that impact on any of the abutters and keep it on the parcel that it's, you know, that
Okay.
it's on. That's really what I'm trying to do, Dan. Because if you look at south and west, you meet the requirements of the distance that you need.
No, I get it. I just hear.
And
sitting
that-
right here
that's
15
all,
years from now,
so
the
that-
pole falls and somebody says, well, that's what the zoning board told us to make it fall. It just doesn't, it just strikes me as not.
And
the
I
kind of
understand,
thing
we
that
just
get
want it
involved with.
designed so that if it does, in terms of, if you're gonna grant the variance, that one of the reasons you're granting it is it's designed so it doesn't fall to that area to give as much protection to those people who were violating their right. by
I'll
giving them
concede
their-
your point.
That's all. Do you want to go through? I'm not sure if they want to go through. I mean, I've read the appraisal, but I don't know for the public, if they've read it, to have somebody just go through. I mean, the general findings, I think, were that basically they looked at other towers in East Long Meadow and properties that had a view and didn't have a view of the property from their properties of the tower. And they pretty much found that whether you had a view of the tower or didn't have a view of the tower, it didn't seem to have any impact on the value of the property. If I read, you know, what the Bennett Franklin survey basically said, that's in East Long Meadow with existing towers in place for new construction. And in fact, I think the Chestnut, you know, is the newer stuff that was done. And then I think we have other towers like the water tower, et cetera, and that didn't seem to have much impact on that either. So I think that was the conclusion from those studies. There was also a list, you know, he had a whole exhaustive, he incorporated the balloon test and the analysis of view, who could see it, who couldn't see it, and from where, and for what part of the season, et cetera. So, but I think the value, the only other thing that I guess I was concerned with is, and I think you answered that, that you're below the frequencies that the government is requiring, well below it, so that the impact on people from off-site is probably going to be less than you would be allowed to have, given the data that you've submitted from a health point of view. If there is, I haven't seen any data that specifically says that these create a major health concern at this point.
Yeah, it's another area I think we really.
No, and I see, but there were people that
No.
brought that up as a concern, Dan, so I think they addressed it with their.
Well, why don't we let the public
Yeah.
speak. Why don't we let the public ask their,
I
think
I
if
want
the
to make
public
sure
asks the
that,
questions that are specific, that they have concerns about, and then Verizon can answer those
I
specific.
just want to make
questions.
sure Verizon, are you all set? Or do you need to present anything more, Ellen?
So I just want to point out that in our original application, we had a narrative that spelled out the criteria for variance and how we satisfy each of those elements, and a separate memo regarding the Telecommunications Act. And, you know, given that use variances are not under 40A, but they are under the Telecommunications Act, just substantiating how we wanted to get those variances. So I just want to have that be reminded, that's part of the record.
Right. And I think, I think the use variance is addressed by that. The dimensional isn't so much addressed by that. So that's what we're trying to deal with. So, but I just wanted to make sure you guys have given
Thank you.
your side before we open up to the public. So,
Thank you.
okay, so at this point, we're gonna open up to the public. I would just ask whoever is here in the public, give your name and address, and then your concerns and what you're addressing.
Attorney Stratton.
Attorney Stratton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity. If I could briefly, and I'll do my best to be very respectful of everyone's time, I submitted a letter which I understand the board has, and my clients, Mr. Burney and Ms. Normandin, rely primarily on the written submission, but I do want to highlight a few items and respond to a few points that were raised during this meeting. I just want to remind everyone, as set forth in the letter, that both Mr. Burney and Ms. Normandin are longtime residents of the town, taxpayers, business owners, and employers in town. They and other citizens of town deserve to be treated fairly and have Verizon held to the language, spirit, and intent of the town's bylaws. And I say that the language and intent of the town's bylaws because we heard a lot tonight, but we didn't hear a lot about the requirements of the bylaw. And I want to highlight a few of them. In relevant part, section 5.50 of the bylaws dealing with wireless facilities specifically refers to the following interests with respect to consideration of the presence of a wireless facility. Quote, minimizing the visual and environmental impacts on the community, quote, preserving the character and appearance of the community while simultaneously allowing adequate, and I'm going to emphasize adequate as the operative phrase, wireless services to be developed, and finally protecting the residential and scenic resources of the community. The way the bylaw attempts to do that is through restricting wireless facilities from existing in a residential district, and also has the double tower height setback. Verizon is requesting a variance from both of those requirements that are intended to address the needs previously articulated under the bylaw. So respectfully, it should be Verizon's burden to establish how those interests are otherwise being met despite the request for variance. What we heard tonight from Mr. Latore, and he did do a fantastic job on presenting coverage maps, and I wrote down a few quotes from what he said, that other locations are not advantageous to Verizon's network plan, or that they don't meet Verizon's coverage objectives. But those are not the interests under the bylaw that should be addressed to this board. What Verizon should be addressing is how they've studied locations to determine that in light of the request for a variance, they've otherwise addressed the concerns I articulated around visual and environmental impacts on the community, preserving the character of the community, and protecting residential and scenic resources of the community while still establishing adequate coverage. That's also the standard I think that you'll find under the Wireless Telecommunications Act. The Telecommunications Act. that basically says that you can't do anything that prevents a wireless company from addressing a gap, but it doesn't say you have to do it in the way that's most advantageous to their network plan, that's the most affordable, or that best meets Verizon's coverage objective for marketing purposes. This board should be more concerned not with what's best for Verizon, but what's best for the community and its residents in the interest highlighted under the bylaw. I think, and that's point one addressed in our letter. Point two is that in terms of the property value depreciation, I appreciate the study which counsel for Verizon was kind enough to share. And it essentially, although speculative as most of these are, concludes that generally there's no property value impact. Nonetheless, it specifically caveats that analysis by, and I'll quote on page 35, our analysis can't dismiss the possibility that individual homes or small numbers of homes have been or could be negatively impacted. It finds if these impacts do exist, they are either too small or too infrequent to result in any widespread, statistically observable impact. I would suggest to you that Ms. Normandin and Mr. Burney, who have property, if they were to develop residentially, who would have a 125-foot tower literally in the backyards of any new homes, are uniquely impacted and fall within the exception stated in this report that the possibility that individual homes or small numbers of homes would be negatively impacted. And that's with respect to the concerns that my clients are raising. They are uniquely impacted and would be less so at an alternative location that may not be optimal or as advantageous to Verizon's network plan, but would nonetheless be more advantageous to them and their property interests, as well as other residents of the town. Finally, the point of the setback, we talked about the request, and we recognize and appreciate that they did move the site further south. And Mr. Chair, you mentioned focusing on the way the tower might fall because they're still requesting a variance. If they can move it 220 feet, why can't they move it 250 feet and not require a variance? Then you don't have to worry about where the tower falls. We're just accepting what Verizon is saying, that that's the preferred location, but I haven't heard
We're still gonna need a side.
why it can't be moved.
Yeah, we're still gonna need a variance because it's just not wide enough, the parcel. You need over 500 feet of frontage or width at that point. You don't have it at the parcel. So on the easterly side, we're gonna need a variance in any event.
It's a fair point. I'm speaking more.
Yeah, and I understand the northerly, they've addressed whether they moved it far enough or they move it a couple of more feet to get rid of the 30 feet variance. But in terms of, that's why I was asking the question in terms of the tower, because they did locate it to the southwesterly portion of the compound to find out what those actual distances were to the actual property line from the actual tower. And so that was the concern, so that if it did fall, that when you added the 35 feet, you're actually over 250 feet from the actual property line. If it did fall, and especially with it designed to fall to the west and to the south, it's highly unlikely that it would fall onto a northerly abutter's property or a westerly abutter's property, but would fall within the project site of the person who's renting it. That's a risk they take by renting it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would suggest, Mr. Chair, that there are other, the site analysis that Mr. Latore provided, there are other sites that would not require any setback that may very well, we have to trust Verizon for its word and their expertise that it may be less optimal for them.
Yeah.
And it may not meet their network objectives, but I didn't hear him say that any of those sites were not adequate or that they wouldn't provide additional coverage. They're not the best solution for Verizon, respectfully, that's not the standard under the.
Yeah,
under
and
the
I'm not
bylaw.
sure that I'm looking to do the standard, but I am concerned that any location that we're gonna get is gonna impact, some of their abutters in any event, either by site, because unfortunately, that whole section of town is residential, residentially zoned and is governed by this, which does not currently allow. We've also had an experience with our board, which we did turn down a request for a tower in the northwesterly section of town. And our bylaw was overturned in court. So we have that in history where we tried to protect the residential neighborhood by turning it down, and we tried to get them to put it on the one of the things that we were trying to do was, when we did that in the past, was to try to put it on that water tower, which is already a pre-existing structure, to cover as much of the town as possible. But where they were locating, it just didn't provide enough service for the northwesterly section of the town, which is just the opposite area here. But we were overturned by a court when we turned it down. And I have concerns when we get overturned by a court, because we don't get to put the protections in necessarily that we would like to put in the restrictions on, to try to protect it and keep the residential character, and to try to locate it such that we get the maximum protection for the neighborhood that we can get, and at the same time provide the service that people do expect today. I mean, people expect to have indoor service at their home for their computers. They also expect to have service in their cars, et cetera. And so we're trying to measure those, and those are a lot of concerns in terms of the immediate abutters. That's why I wanted to see some sort of a study as to see what the impacts were in people in the immediate vicinity in terms of values and health. So that.
Mr. Chair, I'm not suggesting.
I still don't understand why those are considerations. I've always thought we're a land use board. We ought to be looking at the merits of the case based on land use, applying that to our zoning bylaw, hearing from the public.
And that's part of our bylaws.
Yeah. I know, but I really don't like the idea that we get involved with looking at frequencies and coverage and how many people can answer their phone. I could care less about the cell service. All I care about is whether or not the town boards are doing their job. And I'm not saying we're not, but I want to keep us on point. They made an application for a variance. It's not a hard analysis to determine whether they meet the criteria. Hear from the public, weigh what the public's got to say. But the going back and forth with frequencies and coverages and could they put it somewhere else and this and that, it seems to me that we're going to be here all night if we talk about that stuff.
Mr. Plotkin, respectfully, that's all you heard from Verizon was about coverages. What you didn't hear, and I'm not suggesting you turn them down. What you didn't hear from them is the same analysis of these properties, taking into account, as you noted, the land use requirements under the bylaws that talk about visual and environmental impacts, preserving the character and appearance of the community, and protecting residential and scenic resources. They didn't say anything about any of those things with respect to any alternative parcels. All they talked about was the frequency, and I agree with you. That's not your responsibility. What they should be presenting to you on is what is the most optimal site for the land use requirements set forth in the bylaw that also provide adequate coverage. And we haven't heard that, and we suggest that that's what, not that you should turn them down, but you should compel Verizon to engage in that analysis, which is the most relevant analysis under the bylaw.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, and the only reason I'm a little less inclined to see that point of view is I have a utility background of my own, and I know from past experience that when public companies deploy capital to do things like this, there is an analysis done on whether or not what the probability is of getting an approval. To go fight an uphill battle, to cite equipment, or facilities in places where they're going to be met with tough resistance, that is also financial consideration that these companies often take. I am as sensitive to how people feel about the siting of this thing as anybody. I live in the town. I don't live far from where this thing is proposed. I've got Eversource owns land behind my house that they're going to one day want to put solar fields on. So I'm as sensitive as anybody, but I'm also mindful that the zoning board of appeals is not a planning board. It's a judicial kind of board that should make its decisions based on the presentation and that presentation's application to the law, and very little of anything else, in my view. And so what I want to get to is the application of the law to the petition, and I want to hear from the public. We heard from you, Seth, and your presentation was cogent. I think we need to hear from somebody else at this point.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Entertain a second. Anybody else on the line? One at a time. You want to let them in?
If anybody wants to speak, would you please raise your hand? Mr. Hebert.
Mr. Hebert? Mr. Hebert, are you there?
Phil, you're muted.
Mr. Hebert, you're muted. Mr. Hebert?
You can try somebody else.
Let's
Mark.
try somebody else, and maybe Mr. Hebert can straighten out his vocal issues here. How about anybody else raise their hand?
I don't see another hand at the moment. Yep. Mr. Bernie.
Mr. Bernie. So Bernie, are you prepared to speak?
Yeah, he's coming in, Mark. It takes a second.
I'm concerned that maybe he's having the same problem the first
Hello?
time we did.
Okay, yes. Is this Mr. Bernie?
Okay, I see the problem the other gentleman must be having. You have to hit the unmute button in the corner of the screen.
Correct.
But I just want to touch base on, I think there probably are other properties in town where there may be little or no pushback from the neighbors at all. I think there's a couple of properties where the closest vicinity to the closest residence would be over 1,000 feet. So I think it's Verizon's responsibility, providing this would be adequate, maybe not the best coverage, but adequate coverage to explore these other properties where you may get no pushback at all.
I have no idea because it hasn't been proposed. And they've said they've given us various sites that they've looked at in addition to this site, 7 other sites, and also considered, I think, 5 others that they looked at. So they've got 12 different sites that they looked at that potentially could meet some of their needs. And basically they've explained to us where they don't meet their particular needs. We have to consider, once they pick a site, what's the impact on the neighborhood and everyone else. That's what we're here to try to consider, because it's this site today, but I can't tell you what the future is going to bring, and it may be another site tomorrow or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. We don't know.
Correct, but like Seth mentioned, the analysis was on the optimal site. So now the question is that the town has to make is an adequate site for Verizon with less impact on the town, a better move for the board to make.
Well, we have to say, but we don't have those before us. So, I mean, one of the issues is we want to make sure that at least they did a study that was somewhat exhaustive. To say that you have to turn over every stone, I'm not sure. But
No, the question for Verizon would be, are these sites adequate? Not are they optimal, are they adequate?
I understand, but the sites, they've identified sites that they basically said would have the same issues as they're having at this site, such as the Apple place.
Correct. There's zoning requirements, but like I mentioned earlier, there may be no pushback at all from neighbors because some of these are much more remote and in a less populated area with residences being further away. So the question is adequate okay?
Well, I mean, it's hard for me to express because we've only got this site in front of us and we've been given a list of other sites that they've looked at that don't meet their requirements.
So pose the question to Verizon, are any of these other 12 sites adequate?
Can ask that.
Well, I think that question was answered when they went through the analysis of every site they've looked at. The RF engineer gave it what I thought was a reasonable explanation as to why they've been rejected. When a company makes an investment this size, the decision to go forward is generally triggered by, how much good are we going to create here, whether it's revenue for the company or service for the customers or both or whatever it is. They're not likely to deploy millions of dollars or $1 million, whatever this thing costs, for adequate service, to just, because what they would more than likely do is nothing at all. They would more than likely say, we're not going to do anything here until we can get the site that does, the most good with the capital that's going to be deployed. So from that standpoint, I'm satisfied that they've determined that this site makes the most sense. I believe that no matter where they go in town, there's going to be 2 or more people that don't like it, including myself. It could easily be me. So that's the way I look at that. I think what we need to do is determine whether or not they have a right to the approval that they wish us to grant based on the merits, which does not necessarily include how many people don't like the looks of the tower.
Mr. Abear's in.
Hey, Mr. Abear?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I thought Mr. Latore did a great job of presentation of other areas, but whole and behold, I'd like to have an explanation from Verizon on the health effects, which I brought up in the last meeting. Even though they meet supposedly the federal guidelines, there are currently worldwide studies, research studies addressing the health issues concerning cell phone towers.
Yeah, and I would like,
and to totally ignore that information is not acceptable.
yeah, Mr. Abear, if you have that information, these studies that you're alleging, what I'd like to see that so that we can read
It was
those.
supposedly submitted by Dr. Labar.
I don't have him.
To the ZBA. That's what I was told by her.
Well, I don't have them.
And I'm
I
wondering
haven't
if
seen them. I don't know if any other board members have seen them. Have we received anything from Dr. Labar in terms of the health impacts? I mean, it was allegations with regard to that. I just haven't seen the articles and I can't just take it,
No, I agree with you, but I was told by her that she submitted them.
like, we don't have any, and I'll ask our board. I have not seen them.
No, not that I've seen.
May I say something? We're also appearing before the planning board, and it might be that they have received that information because we're also.
That would be the more proper place for this sort of an issue to be discussed, in my opinion.
Well, it goes along with the environmental impact, which is a health and safety impact to the neighborhoods.
Yeah, but we're a zoning board of appeals. So our role here is to decide whether or not someone with a piece of land who wants to do something that zoning does not permit him to do or her to do seeks permission to do it anyway. There are certain rules and regulations that govern that allow us to grant that permission, and that's what they're here for. We don't deal with environmental conservation, planning, colors, any of that.
Well, I just think that as a board, that you take that civic responsibility very
It's got
seriously.
nothing to do with the civic responsibility, Philip. I agree that all the things that you're talking about are worthy concerns. I don't mean to suggest that they're not. What I'm telling you is it's not what we do here.
Right, well, I think we
That's
have
why
to
a town
consider
has
that.
separate board. That's why you have a conservation board and a planning board and a zoning board of appeals.
Yeah, Dan, but I do think we have to do it because public good is one of the criteria we have to find in granting a variance, that it's in, keeping with the public good. So I think it is. However, I just can't do it on conjecture with no studies in front of me. If someone wants to submit those and keep the hearing open to submit those studies, that's fine. I've got stuff from Verizon that basically says, look, we're at 17 point, I think was it 3% of what we're legally allowed to do.
And I understand Verizon's position against the FCC rulings, but there are currently studies that are going to be released in the next month or so concerning cell phone towers. But there are international studies that are available for Verizon, and for Verizon to ignore it completely, whether it's to this board or to the planning board, is totally unacceptable. They should address those concerns and do it. To the fact of, what do these studies say? What is their position, and what is it to the FCC rulings? Now, we all know our federal government is behind by 10 years. And most likely these rules are going to be changing, and it's going to be a great expense to Verizon if they have to remove these towers, not just to put them there, but to remove them if studies are going to show what's expected of them in the near future.
Yeah,
So it's a concern to the neighborhood.
Yeah, but I can't be making decisions based on some study that hasn't been released yet. I have to have we have to have that information before us to be able to consider it.
I understand your position as
I
a
just
board.
can't be making decisions on quote reports that I don't have, that I don't know what they say, to make a determination whether it's serving the public good. Without those studies, I personally wouldn't put any credence to those unless I was provided those studies and can review them.
Well, I would hope that Dr. Lamar can address that, but on her own. But my suggestion would be, I'd like to hear from Verizon on their position as far as these international studies and what they found to be legitimate concerns of today.
Yeah, and I don't know what studies you're referring to, and I would, once I've got the studies and I've shared them with the people from Verizon and they've reviewed the studies, they could then comment and give us their position. But I don't even know which studies we're referring to, so that I could read them myself, share them with the Verizon representatives, and let them comment on those.
So Mark, Dr. Labarge here, if she can clarify whether she provided anything to the either the planning board or this committee.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I did, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Some articles to Nina, but I'm not gonna lie, Nina, I think that it may have been for our other board, and we had gotten a response about, it was a woman who you gave a response from, and said that, that Verizon is meeting all the federal regulations, which we all know means nothing. But Nina, this was a while ago, so I apologize. I did submit those to you, and I did get a response from you guys.
Right, I have not seen them as submitted as part of our materials, so I haven't reviewed them, and I'm a little reluctant to make a decision on something, saying that I'm using that as a basis for a decision for turning something down, because I don't think we'd have a lot of problems in court with that, I would think, if I'm making
Yeah.
decisions on something that's not on the record. I think the court, we'd get thrown out in 2 minutes. And
Yeah.
last thing I want to do is have this shoved down our throats with no conditions, with no protections. We'd be a lot worse off. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. If we do grant the variance, that we have the proper conditions in place to lessen the impact on those people who would be impacted by. That was one of the reasons why we asked for them to submit a revised plan relocating the site on the proposed, overall site to lessen the impact on all of the abutters, and put more of the impact on the landowner who's getting the benefit of the lease, and mitigating the risk to the other neighbors. I'm not
Does
sure
does the doctor have some information she want to share with us about the health aspects of this antenna that she's aware of that she wants us to know about?
The articles really spoke to the long-term effects that having a cell phone tower close to children in schools and things could have. And there is a heightened cause of, or a heightened cancer. And I also just wanted to ask the board if they at any point reached out to our Pittsfield community to say, what are you guys finding? There was a lawsuit against Verizon Wireless because there were lots of complaints about health and safety of their members and their community, and that's ongoing. There isn't a lot of research on 5G towers. We have a tower between you and I, Dan, where we live. There's towers on a mile and a half on each side of us, and we're still not getting good service. This tower is not going to do much more for us.
I understand, but again, I hate to sound like a broken record. We can all have personal opinions on where towers ought to be, whether they work well, whether they don't, whether they should exist or not. But as a zoning board of appeals, we have a job to do, which we're trying to do tonight. And either grant or not grant the approval that Verizon asks for based on the evidence that they've already submitted, not evidence to be submitted later or evidence that or articles. And I've read a lot of these articles, and I'm not making light at all of the concern that you're raising. I've read a lot about that myself. The fact is, unfortunately, federal government has standards that have been adopted as to how much effective radiated output transmitters can transmit for cell towers, television towers, for all kinds of RF emitting devices. And so that's what we as a board have to live with. We can't live with what private citizens may fear or think. We have to go with what the law is presently, which is kind of what I'd like to do tonight. So can we move forward with maybe more public people from the public who want to speak?
You want me to respond to any of this, or?
I'm going to give you a chance once we hear from all, Ellen, if that's
Okay.
so we can be organized. Is there anybody else in the public that wants to speak?
I don't see any more hands, Mark.
Okay, so I'm going to close the public portion, the public opposition comments, and give Verizon a chance to rebut what has been presented.
Okay, well, I will address the concerns that Dr. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Latour.
Yeah, Bart was brought up, and I do understand and hear what everyone says, and I've been doing this for, I don't know, 20 some years, so we hear this frequently. First of all, I'll just say under the Telecommunications Act, it's specific that municipalities cannot deny coverage based on health concerns. That's just that's right in the statute, and so that's the way it is. But that doesn't mean that towns can't be concerned and can't ask about it, or nor that we shouldn't respond. So we did. If you look at our necessity case that we submitted, there is information in there that I think will address some of the questions. And again, what towns can control is the emissions, and that's why we submitted our power density coverage report to show what the level will be and that it will be in compliance, and and that could be a condition that we maintain in compliance. So that is the kind of regulation that a town can be concerned about, that we comply, that we maintain our license, and that's something that we'd be required to do. So that just wanted to mention that. So and I can provide the statute, the section of the Telecommunications Act that speaks to that regulation. And again, that I don't believe we're not putting a tower in someone's right in their backyard. We don't know if there would ever be a development of that property. And even if there were, there are enough examples in the appraisal where towers have been built close to properties, or the towers have been up and then properties developed after the towers have already been erected. So again, what we are providing to the town and what's in the best interest of the town is having good quality service. Our tower might not be the optimal, as I heard someone mention, but it's the best of the locations that we've considered, and that's why we've selected it. There might not be the super best location, but this one is the best that is available, that works on all of the criteria that we have to consider, which is many. So it's not in a thickly, densely populated part of the town, so that we feel that while it does impact some people, it's not as many as it could in some other locations. So again, weighing everything, we do feel that this is the best location. We've listened to your comments. We did relocate it, and we feel that we appreciate all the input, and hope we answered your questions. And if there's any more, we can address them.
I don't think there was anything new brought up here, so I think we're gonna have to at least keep the public hearing open until we get that additional evidence, the evidence that you were gonna submit to receive that evidence, Ellen, for the attempts, showing the attempts that were made, and the data, that you were gonna submit. So those are the two things I just wanted to keep the public hope. I think we got to keep the public hearing open for those, for the limited purpose of those. And I would share that data with the other side and give them an opportunity to comment on that data in that public hearing. But that would be the only issues that would remain open in the public hearing, would be those issues. And if the petitioner or the opponents want to provide those studies to the board, between now and the next hearing, then we would consider that, and that would be also would be open to comment, rebuttal by you at the public hearing as well. Would be shared with you when we'd asked that we try to at least get the information, if we do set a public hearing, at least, a week to 10 days before, so that we can get it to other people and they can review it before the hearing.
When is your next meeting date?
Well, we usually meet on the second Monday of each month. So I don't have the date right in front of me.
What's the data that we've asked Ellen to provide in addition to what's been provided?
They were going to provide us with the data, showing their attempts to contact. Remember, they said they'd try to contact Mr. Bernie, and they had those, and I just wanted to have that data as part of the file. And then they were going to submit the data that was presented tonight to us in the presentation, how they chose the site. So I wanted that data made part of our official record. And then, if anybody has any comments, and I wanted to give the proponents, because they may have been under the impression, because they gave it to the planning board, that we have it. So I want to at least give them the opportunity to get it to our board, and we can then review it, the members of the board, so we can, look at it to see what they have to say and give it to the other side as well, so that they can comment and be prepared at the next hearing to address those issues. I don't mean to drag this out, but in fairness, I want to make sure that all the issues have been addressed.
That's fine.
Is that and so our next meeting, and that's what I wanted to make sure, our next meeting would be the second Monday in January. I just don't have a calendar in front of me.
It's the 10th.
So
I
it'd
just
be
saw
the
in the
10th
chat.
at 6:30, and we'd do it, I guess, by Zoom again. And everybody, I would ask that they have their data in by the 4th. So that gives you about 2.5 weeks to get the information to us. And so that way I can share it, because I don't want to receive it the day of the hearing and not give it to somebody else, and they're walking into the hearing and we're wasting our time. So that's what I would suggest. Is that okay with the other members of the board, or am I overreaching?
No, I agree.
Yeah, that's fine. Mark, I did have two questions.
Yeah.
For Verizon. One was on the appraisal and the valuations, and the second was on the actual variance requested. So with respect to the appraisal, it was pretty comprehensive, over 100 pages. I think I read through all of it, but I couldn't quite find something that was relevant, at least in my mind. It appeared that the properties chosen, all in East Long Meadow, right, were sort of an A and B. One with lines of sight of a cell tower, one without. Fair?
Yep.
What I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, was sort of a historical perspective, and whether it be in East Long Meadow or not, but a before and after, right? So the property value prior to erection of a cell phone tower, and then the impact after. That I think would be relevant. I don't know. I mean, ideally there's things in East Long Meadow, but I mean, East Long Meadow is a small town, but I think that, for that, at least that analysis in my head, you could go broader than just East Long Meadow. So I don't know. I'll pause there. Did I miss something? Was there?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'll talk to the, Bennett Franklin to see if that's something that they have access to, some information where a parcel where they know what the value of it was, then a tower went up and then they know what the value it is after. I mean, what a house is worth, what it sold for, and then a tower went up and then it was sold for more money, even though the tower was there. Yeah, I can ask them. I don't know that that's available.
Yeah, and I just looked at it and I saw, two different samples, and there's lots of different variables that go into property values. So that was one comment. That'd be great if the appraiser can get any kind of data like that. That would help.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second is, and I appreciate that the site has moved. I think that made a lot of sense, especially as I'm thinking about the residences in the north of the site. Can you help me understand why that 30-foot from the northern boundary is necessary? So, and let me say it a little bit differently. As I look at the sort of the variance should be as minimal as possible. If it was 250 setback, we wouldn't be talking, at least on the northern boundary. You'd still have the eastern boundary, which my understanding is it's a related individual who owns the eastern.
Okay.
So in other words, he's asking you to instead of moving it to move it that extra 30 feet, I think.
Maybe not, Mark. I think that what I want is
an explanation.
Impactful. And if there's a rationale and reason, maybe there's a dip that the sight line is lessened in that exact spot. I just couldn't see it from what I was looking at. But
right, I'll respond to that also.
Okay. Any other board members have any other concerns?
No, I think we've heard everything we need to hear.
Brian, you all set?
Yes.
Mark, you want to make a motion to continue this?
Yeah, we'll do a motion then to continue this till, or somebody ought to entertain a motion to continue it to January 10th for the limited purposes of answering Charles's questions and producing the documentation and giving the opponents the opportunity to provide us with the studies and give Ellen the chance to comment on those studies.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor, signify by raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye. So it's unanimous. So we'll be reconvening at this public hearing, continuing this until the 10th of January, but for those sole purposes, I don't want to rehash what we've already been through. And if you choose to, obviously move it further south, that's up to you. If you do, then, present a revised plan.
We have another case.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
I think this one
I
will
have
be
to
much
stop out at
shorter.
this point. I
Yeah,
have to stop out at this point.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
So let's open up the public hearing for the application for 165 Shaker Road. Can someone read the notice for this?
Yes, I can, and just let me find it. The East Long Meadow Zoning Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing on December 13th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. via the following Zoom webinar meeting link. KCV 2021-7, a petition for variance under East Long Meadow zoning bylaws dimensional and density regulations table 3-2 industrial and 5.8 for industrial B for a 15.77 plus or minus foot relief from a 25-foot side yard setback for a ground sign at 165 Shaker Road, Assessors Parcel ID 18-13-C in the Industrial Zoning District. Applicant My Main Squeeze CO Cassandra Saraswallow, 165 Shaker Road, East Long Meadow, Mass. And this was printed on 11/25 and 12/2.
Okay, and we also posted and sent to the abutters within 300 feet.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm satisfied that we've met the requirements. So I would ask somebody from the petitioner to speak what they're looking for and why, and address the reasons why they believe they meet the requirements of a hardship, not derogating from the purposes or intent of the bylaw and in the public good. Is someone here to speak on behalf of My Main Squeeze?
Hello.
Hi, just state your name and address.
So my name is Cassandra Cheraswillo. I own the juice bar. My home address is 15 Melwood Ave in town.
Okay.
I would like a sign because all businesses need a sign to tell customers where they are. Adam has the information as to the setback and all of that.
Okay. Is Adam prepared to speak on that?
Yeah, so ultimately, the bylaw requires a 25-foot setback from the property line. And where the property line is and clarified there, 25-foot setback would literally put that inside the building. So obviously, it's not physically possible to put a sign inside the building on a 25-foot setback itself. What we did is split the difference of the width of the sign overall, split the difference between the of the 15.77 feet left over. So it'd be 9 feet from the building and 9 feet from the front property line as far as placement of the sign directly in front of the building. That would clearly identify Cassie's location and business, whereas placing it on that small peninsula berm on the other side of the driveway might cause confusion with the other businesses there. So the logical and simple placement of the sign itself directly in front of her business there. Like I said, 9 feet from the building and about 9 feet from the front property.
Yeah, so I think your hardship is basically because of the building location currently on the site, you couldn't meet the setback requirement because you'd be inside the building and wouldn't be able to have anybody see it. The only problem I had personally with the sign is, splitting the difference. Is there a reason why you couldn't locate it a little closer to the building than the 9 feet away from the building? It seems to me
the further away, you want it to be visible from the street, but you also don't want to be blocking any views of anybody coming out of any driveways or anything associated with it. So the further back you are from the street line, the better. And we also, it's a less of a variance. It's not as great a variance that we would be granting, because here, being only 9 feet from the road, we're granting a significant, variance of roughly 15.77 feet from the 25-foot setback. So I would request that it be moved back, maybe instead of 9 feet. I don't know, because I know you probably need to maintain it and get around and stuff. So you need to get around the sign. So you may need, for landscaping purposes and things of that nature, to have enough room to get around. But it seems to me that maybe 3 or 4 feet from the building, instead of 9 feet from the building, would then lessen your variance request by, another 5 or 6 feet, which would, be a 10-foot variance versus, so it'd be less than half the requirement. Right now, we're well over half the zoning requirement. So that would be my main concern. And I think you should be able to relocate it and still, have it would have served that function. But be, and leave you enough room to be able to get around the sign for maintenance purposes and landscaping purposes.
Mark,
There is a
before you
planter on the
respond to that,
front of-
can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
The hardship here, we're talking about a variance, right? This is a
Correct.
variance. So it's got to be relating to the land, and it's got to be
And the
space,
structure.
soils, or topography. Does the structure count?
The structure does count, yeah, because you've got the structure on the land already there. So the structure is built and it's actually 25, right, 24 point something feet from the actual street.
No, I understand that. I'm talking
So,
about
yeah.
the legal.
Right, so in terms of putting a sign there, he's saying, that creates the unique situation because of how the building was constructed. I'm gonna have to get a variance of some sort to put a sign up there to be visible from the street.
No, I understand all of that. What I'm asking is, to my knowledge, a variance had to relate to a unique problem with the land.
Well, if you look at the statute, structure is included, Dan.
It is.
Yes.
Okay. You're an attorney, so I'm
Yeah.
taking your word.
No, it's in there as well. If you look at it, I can read.
No. Your word is as good as,
Yeah.
I don't need anything. I just want to make sure we're.
Yeah, structure is in it, and the structure is what creates it. It's just that I just don't feel as comfortable just granting a 9 just because we wanted to split the difference.
And while I'm talking, and I'll try to be quieter, I agree with you that if you're going to grant a variance,
I want as little as possible.
then it needs to be, and I think Charles Graves said the same thing earlier. If you're going to do a variance, it's got to be as minimally intrusive as possible, and grant the relief that's being requested, I think.
No, and that's what we're looking for. And I was checking with Adam whether that would create a problem, moving the sign, back another 4, 5, 6 feet toward the building.
There
The
is
other
a
thing-
planter on the front side of the building there, so I'd have to go back and remeasure that, and it is about that 3-foot mark, so you'd be almost pretty much right up against that planter that's there, that landscaped edge of there's some a planter bed that's there, and no longer is it grass or lawn space. So hence why, and even with other municipalities in the area, when ground signs can't be located at the minimum setback, the typical standard for that is to split the difference between the primary structure, which meets the setback, and the property line. So which is why
I just wasn't
opted
aware
for
of
as
that.
close as
Yeah.
possible. Sure.
Yeah, I just was not aware of that. I'd never heard of that before. That you just split the difference. Usually you try to minimize the variance that you're asking for. And that's why I was just concerned in terms, because I knew you needed some space and I knew there was a planter there. I just didn't know what that space was, but I think it's, it doesn't go out 9 feet. I'd like to be closer to the building. If it's 5 feet or 6 feet from the building,
that would be much less of a variance that you're requesting, so that at that point,
Sure.
we would be giving you a 12-foot variance versus a, a 16-foot variance or almost 16 variance. It's just, we're trying to, in my mind, trying to give it the least possible, because I don't want people coming in and saying, oh, well, you gave it to this guy just because you want to split the difference. And it really doesn't have the thing, and we want to minimize that.
Mark, I was gonna make a comment. What about, I didn't notice when I went by, what about other signs in the area? How are they?
Well, I've seen them. I've looked at that. It used to be Smith Associates, so I'm very familiar with the building. I've probably been in that building 50 times.
Yeah, me too. And I didn't notice the around it.
Yeah, but I mean, you have on one side, I think you have the Tudor House Liquors.
Yeah.
They have a sign, but it wouldn't be blocking their sign or our sign. It's on, you're coming on like a little bit of a curve when you're coming
That
up
curve there, yes. you're
Yeah,
right.
it is. So there's it's there. So it's pretty visible whether you move it back another 4 or 5 feet. I don't think you're going to have any impact, but I'd also like it to keep it further from the street in case ever put sidewalks or something up that side of the street. So that it's
Yeah, you
further
need
away
to
from the
sight, you
sidewalk.
need to look at the sight lines too. So if Adam does that, then I
Right.
think.
So I mean, I didn't see that would impact, I've driven by it both, in both directions. So I didn't see by having a sign roughly where they're in front of the building that it would impact it, the sight line either way, whether it's 9 feet off the line or 5, or 12 feet or 15 feet off the line or whatever it is.
So Adam, check that out and then you can let us know.
Yeah, I mean, I would just look to do it and what's the distance to give you enough room to get around the sign, for sign maintenance and landscaping, so that, it's not blocking your maintenance in terms of what's there and meet your requirements. But I
So
think,
even with that, if you think it's, reasonable that, even obviously from my perspective, I still want to keep this as, obviously farther closer to the street as possible to keep it clearly identified. So then it's just not lost with the building and otherwise there, but also in the same want to obviously respectfully, respect your
right, I mean, in any event,
stipulations as well too,
Yeah.
period. So ultimately,
so
yes,
if you're 5 feet from the building and you got 6 feet, you're 11 feet out from the, you're going to be 11 feet. You'll be able to see it from the, when you add the 6 feet of the sign to that, and it's high enough that I think it'll stand out.
Sure.
From what I can see.
Why don't we entertain a motion to grant them that instead of having them come back? I mean, what is it?
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem. That's what I was going to ask. If you want, could you live with a variance with it being 5 feet, and we would grant you a 14-foot variance?
Cassie,
5 and 6 be 11 feet off, or 11 feet off.
5 feet off
25
of the
would be-
building.
5 feet off of the building.
The landscaping goes out at least 6 feet from the building that's existing it has like a stone path around it. So.
Well, the path isn't, I don't think moving the stone path is going to be that, problematical.
We want to keep this as minimum as we can.
So is it 5 or 6 feet from the building? Is that something, what would you prefer? 6 feet from the building?
Yeah, then.
So there would be, we'd be granting at 6 feet from the building a 12-foot variance.
And I'd make a motion, I'd make a motion, we make a decision.
Yeah, it would be in the same location it is, but instead of being 9 feet from the street, it would be 6 feet from it would be 12 feet from the street. Is that okay, Adam and Cassie?
Well, it's a matter of what we're going to approve.
No, I just want to make sure they practically, they can actually put their sign there. That's all. I just want to make sure it's not a problem with them.
I mean, I believe.
ultimately it's not an issue with me, but like I said, I'll give that to Cassie.
I'd have to see the drawings again to know. My concern is visibility, but if you, the board, believe that it would still be visible, then I have no objection. I would just respectfully remind you that there are other businesses, like you've said, on the street already with existing signs that are less than that off of
Yeah.
the street. And I understand they're different lots.
Yep.
But it is the same business zone. And I have one of the very few buildings that does not have a sign. And I believe it is critical that my business is easily identifiable on the road.
Yeah, no, and I understand, and I think you'll still have that meet that need. If you're 12, if the beginning of the sign is 12 feet off of the road. So I think that's, you'll have that, and then you have another basically 12 feet from that point to the building. It might be a little bit
So
cheaper
Cassie,
for you
I
to
think-
put it in.
If I was in your shoes, I'd be looking at this in a couple different ways. One is the board hasn't heard any evidence that says, other than splitting the difference, 9 and 9, like that's not all that compelling. You can come back and present some, pictures and showing what's there that would necessitate a 9-foot variance. Or I think we can all say that, reasonable is, Mark said 6 feet. So we can come back, continue it with some pictures and present some evidence why 9 feet is absolutely necessary.
Or you can get your 6 feet tonight.
6 feet.
I'm not concerned about the distance. I just, the landscaping has already, I don't want to mess with the landscaping as that's already been a large budget and it is set as it is. So if it doesn't impede the landscaping, that would be fine. And I believe it is at only 5 or 6 feet off of I've never measured how far the landscaping comes out, but that's all.
I didn't think it went, it didn't look to be that far out, but I didn't measure it.
So what, I'll make a motion, we continue it. She can come back with whatever she'd like to suggest that we do, okay?
We're meeting on the
It's-
10th. again,
it's-
Cassie,
it's
so
We're
quarter to
meeting on the
nine.
10th, Cassie, you'll have to wait, I don't mean to put you through this, but you're the second guy up, so I apologize for the long delay that you guys had to sit through.
We're the first one, respectfully, we were the first one on the agenda. I'm fine with taking the 6 feet. I have no issues with that. I'd rather not continue to draw this out.
Okay,
You want to give the 6 feet, I will accept that.
okay. Do we have a motion of the 6 feet?
I'll make such a motion that we grant a variance of 6 feet or whatever.
6 feet from the 6 feet from the building, 12 feet.
6 feet from the building, right?
12 feet from the street.
Correct,
So it'll be a 12-foot variance that we're granting.
right. So moved. Well, I mean, you
Yeah.
need a second.
Right.
Second.
And it'll be in the
Second.
location where you showed it too, so it'll be back an additional 3 feet.
Correct.
12 feet off the line.
Through the chair, this is a public hearing. I don't know if there's any
Yeah,
comments.
I just wanted to find out, is anybody here in opposition?
I don't see any hands.
not.
raised.
Okay, anybody here? So if there's nobody in opposition, I'm going to close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, raise your hand. I'm in favor.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. And now we'll entertain Dan's motion for the 12-foot variance in the location that the sign was shown on the plan that you gave us. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second. Okay, let's do a vote. We'll just do a roll call. Francis?
Yes.
Yes. James?
Yes.
Mark? Yes. Dan?
Yes.
And Charles?
Yes, and I wish Cassie all the best in her endeavors.
So,
Absolutely.
there's a 20-day appeal period. You can build at your own risk. Between now and then, I don't think anybody will appeal it, but you never know.
Well, that's one of the reasons we got to be careful. And Cassie, one of the reasons I'm careful about granting sign approvals like this. I wish everybody could have as big a sign as they want. I'm a retail real estate guy, and that's all I do is work on getting big fat signs in big locations. The problem is that in a town like Long Meadow, where you've got a lot of old real estate and nothing conforms, if you don't have a tight control over signage, pretty soon you just have people that just say, listen, I need to have a bigger sign because the guy next to me has a big sign blocking my sign. And pretty soon the place just turns into a mess. And that's the reason why we got to kind of be tight about it. But I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Well, I same to you and good luck with your business and, you know, I'm Smith Associates did well there and I hope you guys do as well, if not better.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think that's it. Do we have any other matters to discuss?
Mark, it's just the meeting schedule for 2022. If the board had any concerns about that, it's the usual format.
Yeah, I mean, are we going to be going back at some point to in-person meetings?
Don, if you're
Say
still
on
there.
that. Yeah, so we're close to having having the equipment installed probably shortly after the first of the year, I hope, in the library conference room where you typically used to meet.
Yeah.
Which will allow you to meet in person, but also facilitate.
So it would be like a hybrid meeting for those who
Correct.
couldn't make it to the
Yep.
to the library that
So-
they could do it.
I would say for the January meeting, given that you're going to have 8 or 9 representatives from Verizon on that Zoom call anyway, it would be impossible to do it at the library.
Yeah, and my suggestion is that we continue, you know, using Zoom until further notice. And then
Essentially
we can,
February,
if, you know, February, March, whenever the capability is, then we can decide whether we'll have them to be a hybrid type meeting. But for now, until we vote otherwise, it'll be Zoom. I think that's probably the safest. What does the board feel?
Yeah, sounds good, Mark.
So that's what I would say. We continue 6:30 Zoom hearings on the second Monday. So everybody has, you know, can put that on their calendar going forward for the year. And we don't get petitions and obviously we won't have hearings. We know we have at least one petition on for January 10th. I don't know what will happen, or is it the 10th? I forget the date now already, but whatever the 13th or whatever the date is, the 11th, I think it's the 11th. But whatever the date is on the hearing for the next hearing, it'll be the second Monday of each month for 2022. And for now, it'll be Zoom until otherwise voted by the board of it, you know. I think that's the safest way. Okay. And are there any other matters?
No, this is a nice long one.
I apologize for holding you guys up. This is like what are we, 2.5, well, 2 hours and 15 minutes, not too bad. And I apologize for dragging it out, but it's unfortunate when you have a lot of opposition, you want to make sure you get all the information. And, you know, unfortunately, when you have public good, Dan, it opens up a lot of things.
No, and I believe me, I'm aware of the public good. I don't, you know, I didn't want to dive into the health aspects and
No,
throw water on
yeah.
people's concerns about that. That is not the public good. I mean, what was being brought up there and debated there, what was not that. I mean, I'm not suggesting that isn't.
Well, I don't know how much of the setback had to do with neighbors and their, you know, the impact of these things with the frequencies on the immediate neighbors. That's one of the reasons why I was concerned about the distances, trying to keep the distances set forth in the bylaws as much as we can.
Well, I also think sometimes petitioners don't really understand what a ZBA does as opposed to what a planning board does. And it's important to me because when I say some of the things that I say, sometimes if people don't understand the difference, they think that I'm just being flippant about the issue that they're concerned about, like health. And that's not at all the case.
Yeah.
We got to make sure people understand, hey, these are the kinds of approvals that we give out and the conditions under which we give them out.
Right.
We don't give out those other ones. You got to go see those people.
Right.
You know, that's all.
But I do think we should, if we're going to grant it, that we probably have to start thinking about conditions in terms of keeping their license, you know, and also not exceeding the frequencies set forth in their licenses, and that you know,
we should look to other towns in the state that, you know, I just, from what I do for a living, I know a lot of towns that are very tough with zoning. And you go to Shrewsbury, go to Marlboro. There's a lot of towns in the state, I'm sure you're familiar, Mark, that have really faced a lot of this stuff. They're much denser metro areas. They have many more cell sites than we have. And maybe we ought to look at the kinds of decisions that they've made.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I want to look at, because if we're going to be granting it, I do want to be able to put fair conditions on and make sure they're acceptable to them and not be overburdening on them either. But also, you know, making sure we're protecting that they get built according to what they gave us on the plans. And, you know, with the protections, I just thought it was important that they design it, you know, yes, it could fall in the other direction, but I want it designed to make sure that the likelihood of it falling will be falling on the site that it's on.
No, I get it. I know your heart's in the right place. I just want to make sure that we're weighing in areas where we are legally and technically.
I mean, I didn't set the setback requirements for these towers, and they were set for a reason. And I'm surmising that part of the reasons were, one, they didn't want it falling on somebody's house or buildings that were next door, but they also, the 250 was, they were worried about wind blown and being downwind, so that I want to make sure that it's built to fall, if it does fall, you know, on the, you know, toward the area that, you know, away from the neighbors. And there's a risk that somebody, if you want to rent your site to somebody who's going to put it up, you've got the right.
Understood completely. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I think we're also moved. Thank you, guys. I apologize for holding you up. But think about that before the next meeting, guys. And if you can find some stuff from other towns, that I would appreciate. I'll see what I can do to see if I can find some in other locations. But if anybody can find any, you know,
I'll bet you somebody in your firm has represented somebody in one of those.
Well, that's what I mean. I'll find out about it. So.
All right. Thanks, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, good night.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Or forget to vote.
Thanks.
See you, Mark.
Bye.